Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to another episode of the McCoy Leadership Podcast. Today we have Andrew Davies with us. And folks, I'm not going to lie to you. I started to look at this and was trying to decide, if Andrew was a good fit. And as I looked through everything, it says that he uses improv and theater to help improve and build stronger teams. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought this is definitely a good fit. We got to find out more about how we can use improv and theater within building teams. And then we're going to find out maybe some more about some other projects that Andrew has. Andrew, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show and really happy to talk about it, Amos. Yeah, so as you said, my life and work are really structured around the power of improvisation, specifically improvisational comedy, as a way to notice more about ourselves, to improve our own leadership skills, our own listening skills, and lots of other skills, and to help our teams and communities to be stronger as well. So my journey really started with theater in high school and college. That really gave me a love for the power of theater to bring people together, to find my own voice, to find my own leadership skills. And then in New York City, studying improvisation for about 5 years at the Magnet Theater, I found the love of performing improvisation, which is its own art form, and I think has a lot of unique qualities that make it amazing, both as an artistic medium and as a medium for growth and development of ourselves and our teams. And for about the last 15 years, I've really been teaching improvisation in different contexts, in schools, in organizations, with teams, with Artly Working. We've led programs at over 100 teams, including large organizations that folks know, like Netflix and Roblox and Meta, and lots of smaller tech teams that are teams of 5 or 10 folks. And all of my work is really in the belief that A, everyone is an artist, and B, everyone is a leader. And I think that finding our artistic voice and finding our voice for leadership and helping people is so important. And for me, improv is the medium to help people practice that and grow.
That is awesome. But I got to ask, I a few years ago when I was managing a nonprofit, we created, we had a board of directors, and the board of directors were all, business owners, very serious people. And I wanted to get those board of directors to reach out to our membership. So I kind of wanted to split up the membership and have each one reach out to so many. And I don't remember, I think each person on the board got 10 people or something. So I thought, well, how can I make this fun? So I worked with the staff that I had at the time, and we came up with this amazing idea that we were going to create a game called Memberopoly. And so we created a life-sized Monopoly board. We got big blow-up dice, and I printed money with the board of directors' pictures on them and, did all this stuff. And I bring in all these business owners for a special meeting, not telling them that we're going to play a game. And then they come into the room and they see this. And immediately I see the looks on everybody's faces like, you have to be kidding me. We're not going to play a game. But what I saw happen was, as we got started, all of a sudden, all of those fears, insecurities, thoughts that we're doing something stupid started to disappear, and it became valuable. And I didn't intend it to be a team building exercise, but it really was. How many times do you experience that you get in a room full of business people, executives, or a team, and you say, we're going to do some improv, and they're like, no, we're not.
Yeah, I love that story and appreciate the image of the looks on their faces when they first saw the game, and then slowly getting used to it, right? And that is definitely something we experience often, right? When we go into organizations, as we're planning, we're often told, like, the team are introverts, they're not going to want to play, or these are very serious folks, they're not going to want to play, they're not going to see it as valuable. And it's really up to us when we first come in to help establish that sense of, like, safety, that we're going to play together, but you're going to be fine, right? Because I think that reaction from folks about being scared of the game is really about a fear of trying something new, right? It's a fear of being put in a situation that they can't really control. And this is something I think that happens to us when we shift from being really kids to adults, is that we become more afraid of making a mistake and messing up than we do excited to play that game or excited to try the new thing, right? If you did the same game with a group of kids, right, and you didn't tell them, you said, hey, we're playing a game today that's different, they would be like, oh my gosh, I want to play first, right? And I see this with children that I work with when I teach improv with anyone really under 10, and I ask for a volunteer, every hand shoots up right away. And when I play any game with adults in an organization, I don't even ask for volunteers, Amos, right? Because I know not a single hand is going to go up. Everyone's going to say, no, somebody else go first. So it's really about helping people recognize that it's okay to be a little bit afraid, but to make them feel safe that we're going to all play together. I think what you did and you mentioned in your meeting that was so important was we're all doing this together, right? You weren't putting one person on the spot. We're all going on the spot together. We're all going to try this silly game together. And with companies, when we come in, one of the things that my partner Dave Klasko and I always say when we lead sessions is we're not asking you to, jump on the stage and be an actor right now. We're just asking you to notice where your comfort zone is and just click one little notch up. So for some people, speaking at all during an improv game takes a huge amount of courage and their own strength, right? Other people are more comfortable speaking in front of people and jump into it right away. But it definitely is the most common reaction when we start is, I don't want to do this. And then when we finish, it's, oh, why can't we play more games? Like, why is it done already? So that's how it goes. Yeah.
So you said something there, as we grow up, we kind of lose something. And I'm curious your thoughts, because you've been working in this field for 15 years and you are the expert when it comes to improv within business and youth. Do you believe that the youth are starting to grow out of it sooner? So I have a daughter that's 11 and just getting ready to graduate 5th grade. And I'm starting to see it already in 5th grade, where I believe she's starting to outgrow that desire to want to do the new thing. So now if I say we're going to play a new game and it's something I made up and there's some new rules, she's not so sure, like, well, it's different. I don't know. So what are your thoughts? Or are youth growing up faster or growing out of that comfort zone?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely always shifting, and I think from our childhoods to our kids' childhoods, I have a 1 and a 3-year-old, so they're much earlier in the journey. But I think technology is changing childhood and growing up in ways that are really hard to predict or understand. And I'm coming to grips with it as well. And I do see when we visit students that, I think of it as roughly around age 10 that things start to shift. And what I see happen in middle school and high school, the big shift is that people become more concerned about what their peers think, right? And their peers become more judgmental. So whether or not it's a kind community or judging community, they become afraid of stepping out in front of their classmates or in front of their peers. And it's hard to create that atmosphere of trust and of play that I think kids all have. I think 7-year-olds, none of them are afraid of looking silly in front of their friends. They want to play the games. And it'll be interesting to see how it keeps shifting. I think for me, it's something that I'm trying to get everyone back in touch with, both adults and kids, in touch with that creativity and play and the joy of play, right? Everyone listening to this podcast, I think in some arena of your life, you still love play, right? There's something in your personal life. It's a hobby. Maybe it's like fishing on the weekend or basketball with your friends or puzzles or whatever it is. There's an element of your life in which you feel comfortable trying new things, failing and it being fine, playing. But then in a lot of areas of our life, we don't want to fail. We're scared of failing. And so for me, a lot of it is helping people tap back into the comfortability with that. And one of the things I really feel that's great about improv is that it feels very high stakes, but it's actually very low stakes, right? So when we come in and we're playing a game with folks, and there's a game we love to play, Amos, called Speech, where you get in a room and we have a circle and one person has to come into the middle And we all chant speech, speech, speech. And then they have to say, I am sick and tired of, and they pause, and someone from the outside of the circle suggests what they're tired of. Something simple like pencils or water bottles or trees or cars. And then they have to say 3 reasons they're sick and tired of trees. And after each one, everyone kind of cheers and cheers them along, right? And it feels very high stakes for the person in the middle. It feels very scary, but actually it's not, right? Actually, it's just a silly speech about trees. It takes 30 seconds. It's over quickly. But what I love about it is it helps them get comfortable with that feeling of being scared, of being a high stakes situation in what is actually a very low stakes situation, right? So that when they're in their own lives, when they're actually presenting to another company or really doing something that is out of their comfort zone, they have practice living in that space, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? So I think that's a big part of it in the work we do.
I like that. I had read a book many years ago, Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Work Week. And one of the exercises that he has you do in the book about being comfortable and uncomfortable is, as he talks about starting your own business, many people never do it. I was one of those people that probably should have done it 15 years ago, but continually didn't. And he said, so, there were a couple exercises. The one was, I want you to dress in dirty clothes, only take $1 and go live outside, wander around town with only $1 for an entire day and understand, what it would be like to be homeless, because if that's your fear, that if you start your business, you can't pay your bills and stuff, kind of face it. And the second one was making eye contact with people, just, walking up and down the street, going to the bank, going to the post office. And so I love that you're forcing people, or not forcing, but you're helping them through improv, through that becoming comfortable, being uncomfortable. The other thing that popped into my head is I think we should create. Do you remember Whose Line Is It? That television show?
That was kind of my introduction to improv as a kid. Yeah.
So I think we should create a Whose Line Is It leadership version and get leadership experts on the show and have fun with that. I'm going way off.
That would be great. No, it's definitely on topic. Those guys still, members of that show still tour as like Who's Live Anyway. So they do a live show. They come around to different towns. I saw them a year or two ago, and it's great. For folks that don't know, they're really doing what we call an improv, like short form improv, which are games that are 2 to 3 minutes with suggestions and performing. But definitely, I think people love that. And I think bringing leadership in is great. And, one thing that I'll say when, in thinking about leaders, when I was thinking about your podcast, Amos, is that one of the biggest things that I look for when we're coming into organizations is, does the C-suite or the CEO or the team leader that's hired us or brought us in, do they actually join the workshop? Because sometimes I would say about half the time they join the workshop and they play with everyone else and they do the activities. And about half the time they don't. They say, you guys are going to do this improv thing. I'm going to be at work. And the message that sends from leadership when they say, you do this, but this isn't real work, or this is your thing, I have important work to do, is so indicative to me often of when a company or a team is working well and when it's kind of broken. When the leader says, these skills of leadership skills, team skills, listening skills, co-working skills, when they don't see those as valuable for them, and also when they see themselves as, I'm the leader, I already know everything, so I don't need to learn anything new. You guys need to learn something new because you're the team. And that is just so tough to see. And then when there's teams where the team leader or the manager or the CEO is in the room and participating and is modeling, I also want to learn. I also think I can be a better leader and grow. It's so important, right? And I feel like everyone listening to your podcast, I feel like has already bought into the idea probably that we can be better as leaders, right? That they recognize that we are never done learning. We're never done growing. We can always be a better leader. But I think just that choice is so vitally important in our teams and in our growth. And as leaders, is the modeling by what we do. We were talking about our kids earlier, Amos, and I often feel talking to other parents that being a parent is much more about noticing your own behavior and changing your own behavior rather than trying to affect your kids' behavior, right? because they follow you. And you could tell them all day, you need to be kind to people. You need to say thank you to people. But if they don't see you saying thank you to people or being kind to people or modeling that behavior, that just speaks so much louder, right? So in the same way as leaders, what we do is so much more important than what we preach or what we say.
Absolutely. It's one of the things, I mean, honestly, here recently, I realized with my own family, I'm reading a book by Valerie Burton called It's About Time. And it's a book about time. And one of the things that kind of came out of that is, you know, a shift that happened during the industrial age was that we shifted to becoming okay with trading our time for money. So you as a consultant, myself as a consultant, I mean, we are truly trading our time for money. And, you know, kind of through that process, you don't realize it, but all of a sudden working, you know, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, it becomes normal for many people. But the association, what hit me was there's an association there that we don't want to take time for personal development, games, leisure, and those types of things, because I think in our minds we have decided that leisure or anything that is not money for our time is a loss. So we've kind of made a shift, you know, to that. And I think even there, you know, some of the CEOs that maybe think, well, I can't go to this. It's not that they don't want to. It's that they're fearful that they're going to lose something, you know, on the money side. I'm going to lose a deal. I'm going to lose, you know, so they're not seeing it for what it is. I just, excuse me, I think that's fascinating. And then what are we teaching our children? The same things that we're doing, right?
Right.
So another thing I wanted to hit on, you talk about it, Andrew, you have said multiple times, I believe, that, you know, improv is not only for extroverts. And you kind of hit on it a little bit a few seconds ago, but how does it benefit introverts? How and do introverts actually participate, or do they go hide in the corner or under a desk?
Yeah, I love talking about this because I think it's so important, because I think a lot of people probably even listening right now are saying, oh, I could never do improv. Like, that's great for you, Andrew. That's great for you, Amos, but I could never do improv. I don't want to talk in front of people. And I think it's, for me, because of a misconception about what improvisation is and what makes a great improviser. And I think that people think it's about being funny, being quick, being performative, being loud, when actually the number one skill to be a great improviser is to be a great listener. Because you're making things up on the spot, because you're creating things in the moment, being able to be an incredible listener, to listen to your partners in a scene or in a game or in an activity, is so critical in building the scene, right? I think so many times we can get away with not really listening to people or not really being engaged, and people don't necessarily know. When we're doing improvisation, if you're not listening to the people in your scene, it is obvious immediately to anyone watching, right? Because if one person starts a scene and they say like, Mom, I don't want to go to school, and then the other person says, well, I called this meeting, right? It's clear that like they didn't even listen to the partner. And so what I always see is that folks who feel that they're introverts, I always tell them, we want your listening skills. We want your participation. And they are often the ones in our workshops who are reluctant to speak first and are listening, but often have the best insights or the best addition to the scene because they're hearing and noticing details that are so important. And that's one of the reasons I really love improvisation as an art form to practice, is that it really is about practicing listening in a new way. We all sort of recognize the importance of listening and try and remind ourselves to be better listeners. But how do we actually practice that in day-to-day life, right? Like, how do we actually practice improving our listening skills, listening and thinking on the spot at the same time, being able to do both? And improv, you are really like forced into that practice. So one of the things I love about improv and for listening is that it makes intangible skills like listening very tangible, right? When you're doing improv, listening is critical because you're building it one step at a time. I had an improv teacher who had the metaphor that performing improv is about sinking into quicksand, and every idea that you have that you add to the scene is putting one little brick down to start to build a floor underneath you so that you can grow, right? So that you're constantly sinking into quicksand. You have to have one more idea in there. So it just makes that practice very tangible. And I think introverts can be really amazing at improv. And I think that, we all have elements in our lives and moments when we are the extrovert and the introvert. And improv can help us recognize that and recognize what we need to feel comfortable and to be able to fully participate in the moment.
I think that's amazing because I've never thought about it, but how do you practice listening? I mean, that alone is a great point. And I think a good segue into talking about meetings, which, well, meetings kind of have a bad reputation, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know too many people that are saying, oh, let's have another meeting. And if they really are saying that, everybody else is rolling their eyes and saying, oh no, another meeting. So what do you believe helps to make a meeting more effective and make it something that people maybe want to come to?
Yeah, so with Artly Working, I'm our Better Meetings director, and this really grew out of a lot of my friends in traditional jobs telling me about their days and saying, oh yeah, yesterday I just had a bunch of meetings, so I didn't actually get any work done. And I would say, what do you mean you had meetings all day and you didn't do any work? They're like, yeah, we have to go to the meetings. My boss talks for like 2 hours and we just kind of listen, and I do email when I can. And it's shocking to me because meetings should be the best part of our day and are often the worst part of our day, right? The idea that when we have our team gathered together in a room, whether virtually or in person, that is the time when we have all the brain power of our team. We have all these great possibilities and we need to use them. So I've helped people to think about how can we use improvisation as a way to, make meetings fun and engaging, to build energy in meetings. Sometimes I often tell people spending 3 or 5 minutes doing an improv game, doing a team building game as part of your meeting will make the rest of the meeting more energized and better, right? Because it'll really wake people up, kick them out of their kind of email zombie fatigue fog and get them into the moment, playing together and building those moments. And that it's so important to be intentional with our meetings, right? I think so often we have meetings because it's on the calendar, because it's Wednesday, or because we have our weekly check-in, but the leaders are not making sure that this meeting is intentional and with purpose. So I created a template, a one-page template of how to do better meetings. And it has my kind of ABCs of better meetings, which is about effective. How do you want people to feel at this meeting? B is behavioral. How do you want people to behave? What do you want them to do during the meeting and after the meeting? And C is cognitive. What do you want people to know during and after the meeting? And this can be something that, depending on the importance of the meeting, you work on planning for hours or days. If it's, let's say, a company-wide meeting for 2 hours, or it might be something you do 5 minutes before the meeting. If it's your weekly check-in, just checking in with yourself of where are we at, right? What do I want people to do? What do I want people to know? And this will really help keep you grounded so that when the meeting goes in a different direction, you can come back to your ABCs and say, wait, guys, this is a great conversation, but I want to put this in the parking lot for a future meeting, because actually what we want to focus on right now is, is this sales call we have this week, or is this upcoming deadline? And the affective is, I think, the thing that people think about the least, but is so important and where improv can come in, which is, what is the energy you're looking for on the team? Are you struggling as a team and you want the team to really feel nervous? You want them to feel worried that, like, guys, we are not going to survive as an organization if we don't turn the ship around? Or do you want people to feel proud? Is this meeting about feeling proud of the work they've done for this year and pausing for a few minutes and saying, we had incredible accomplishments this year. Can we talk about that before we move on to the next project, right? And so those meetings would be very different. And the improv or facilitation that I would recommend for those are very different. So we try and help people think about this holistically, and also, like I said, help people think about whether you have 5 minutes or 5 hours to plan for the meeting. Make sure you bring a little bit of intention in, right? Like, Amos, if you have a meeting today at noon and you realize at 11:45 a.m., I'm not actually sure what the goal of this meeting is, just forcing yourself to spend 5 minutes, go through a quick checklist, will really help to say, okay, I'm going to make sure this is the one thing I really want to get out of this meeting. And that'll help it go a lot better.
You mean meetings are supposed to have a purpose and some sort of outcome?
Yeah. Theoretically, that's the goal, you know?
I thought meetings were just an opportunity for me to assert the fact that I'm the CEO and everybody works for me and they better do what I tell them to do.
Right. And that's what ends up being a lot, right? My sister had a job that luckily she left, and I won't name the organization, but she would have her meetings with her boss, and she said it was basically her boss's podcast. They had an hour-long meeting. It was 3 of them in the call on Zoom, and the boss would just talk, and then with about 5 minutes left, she would have to interrupt him to say, hey, can we actually talk about what's going on this week? Because he was literally just talking at them for the hour. It's crazy, and that's not uncommon. I'm sure people listening have experiences like that.
Yeah, I was making fun of it, but at the end of the day, I think we've all been in meetings, and we've probably all, been the leader of a meeting that kind of was that way. How do you keep that idea of having a little bit of play at the beginning of a meeting? How do you keep it professional? Because I can see there are people listening right now that are saying, wait a minute, he's suggesting play like elementary school. Like, this doesn't make sense. How do you keep it professional so that people stay on track and you're creating the environment that you want?
Yeah, I think if you think about the intention of your meetings, then your play should play into what you're looking for out of your meeting, right? So if this meeting is really about brainstorming new ideas for the next quarter of what you want to sell or how you want to market your product, your organization, then you could play an improv game I love called like Amazing Advertisers, where you get into small groups and the groups get a suggestion of 2 different people think of an object. So you can look around the room, think of, coffee cup light bulb, right? And now the group has to sell a coffee cup light bulb, and they have to make up what that is and just sell that together. So it's a silly game. They're selling an imaginary product, but what they have to do is build on each other's ideas. So one person says, oh yeah, the coffee cup light bulb. Has this ever happened to you? You're drinking your coffee, but you can't even see it and you spill it all over yourself. Well, introducing the coffee cup light bulb. It's so bright, you can't miss it. And everyone has to stare at your coffee. And then the next person says, yes, and the coffee is always kept warm because the energy from the light bulb goes into the coffee and keeps it warm, right? So whatever the silly idea it is, it gets you working together and collaborating. So you want the play or the team building to support whatever your mission is for that day, right? Maybe if your mission is getting people worried, like I said, maybe it's not a positive meeting. Maybe you're saying we should be worried about our sales, right? Maybe you have people, play a game together where they have problems. They have to help each other. We play a game called like Fortunately, Unfortunately, where you, in groups of 3, you tell a story together and you have to continue the story, but the story has to go up and down. So you help people see that life goes up and down. So if the first person says, I just got a new puppy for the holidays. Everyone says, hooray. And then the next person has to bring it down. So they say, but then my puppy ran away. Oh, no. And then the next person says, but then we put up signs and someone found the puppy. Hooray. But then the puppy's hair had been shaved when we got him back. Oh, no. Whatever it is, it's a story of ups and downs. So you start to have your team think about, listen, there's going to be ups and downs in our company, and we're in a down right now. And we need to think about, like, how do we get back to the up, right? So I think if there's intention to your meeting, and then there can be intention to your play as well, so that it supports the meeting and people make the connection, and they don't say, oh, this is totally unrelated, or this is just, we're just playing Twister and then having a meeting, right?
Yeah. Yep. Twister, though, that could be stretching it. I'm seeing a workers' comp claim there. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. I don't endorse that. Yeah.
So one of the things that I've noticed, and listening to what you're saying, I think I'm kind of connecting maybe 2 different things together, but I have started to notice with my clients, I've changed over the past over the past month or so. When I meet with a client, I've always started with, kind of what's going on, with you, what's happening, so on and so forth. And I have noticed over the years that typically when I sit down with a client and I ask those questions, they're always going to tell me the worst thing that's happened this week. And at the same time, they're paying me to coach them, to train them, or, depending on that engagement with them, they're paying me to fix it, right? Not necessarily fix the problem, but to help. So I get that. But I also, what I started to experiment with is now I'm starting to ask, hey, what's the best thing that's happened this week to start the meeting off? Why was it so important? And we're getting on a positive note, and there still might be negative things that need to be discussed, but we're starting on a positive note, and it seems to set their mind, and they're able to pay attention and get more out of the meeting because they started on a positive note. And so by starting with play, I'm kind of picturing that you're doing the same thing. You're setting that tone for that. So the big question in my mind is, that all makes sense. How do we do it with remote meetings? Because you and I are meeting remotely, but we both have our cameras on and we can see each other and we can kind of, tell when somebody's joking or not. The worst thing in the world is getting on a Zoom meeting with 25 people and 24 of them have their camera off, and now they're doing something else. So, well, how do you work through that, and can you use improv in virtual meetings?
Yeah, definitely you can use improv in virtual meetings. With Artly Working, we really got very busy during COVID, I think, because people didn't know how to keep their teams connected during these times where we were all physically apart. A lot of teams were already remote, but then a lot of teams were remote by force, right? Or surprisingly remote. And improv can really definitely be played online. So one easy way to do it, if people have their cameras on, but let's say, like you said, there's 25 people, I love to play like a silent improv game, right? So like one I'll do is just put in the chat box an emotion that you want to see, and then everyone leave their screens. And then when you come back, be acting out that emotion, right? Just to like wake ourselves up a little bit and be in the moment. So like angry, great. Everybody leave the screens, come back angry, right? So even for the people who don't have their cameras on or watching, they get this really funny visual of like all their coworkers acting angry. And you don't need to come up with anything. You can also play games like in the chat, right? Like you could have moments to have ideas in there, right? Like what hit song best describes our company, right? And it's like living on a prayer or whatever it is, right? You put the ideas into the chat box and get all the funny jokes in there too, right? So encouraging people to play and be conversational in there is great. And, again, coming back to kind of like meetings, if you have a meeting where 20 people, let's say, have their cameras off, I'd love for that organization or that team leader to ask themselves, like, what exactly are we doing at this meeting, right? If I actually don't need the people to have their camera on, do we need to be having this meeting? Am I just expecting them to be like listening to me and listening to this? And if that's the case, would it be better if I literally just recorded a video and sent them a video or wrote an email, right? Because we're not really meeting if you're not asking people to participate. That's really one metric that I want people to think about. And I'm working on my first book right now about my work and about some of the tools. And the working title is Participate, because I'm finding that is the main metric of whether or not something is successful is, are people asked to participate or are people asked to just sit back and watch? And that's the main success or not of a meeting. But definitely, I think improv can happen virtually. And for virtual meetings, it's even more important than in-person meetings to be intentional about it, because why are we gathering is so much more important when we're virtual. It seems easier because it's like, oh, people just sign on, but we need to be more intentional about creating a space versus in person. Like you said, we can recognize, okay, people are bored or people's heads are elsewhere. Online, we really need to make it intentional so that people are drawn in. And if it is clear that everyone's just doing their emails, say, you know what, guys, it's clear we're all working on other things right now, and that's totally fine. I'm going to send a longer email with these updates. Have a great day. And I always say, like, no one's ever angry when they get an email that says our hour-long meeting is going to be half an hour or we're going to cancel the meeting. Nobody's ever really angry about that. So I think the fear of that is not a big deal either. So, so important.
I get angry every time a meeting is canceled. I mean, I just can't wait to get online and spend useless time with people. I'm kidding. So I was thinking about another thing I did during the pandemic, and I guess I never thought about it. But we're talking a lot about playing games and getting people into the right zone. But does improv have to be necessarily playing a game? So during the pandemic, I had a group that we used to get together at breakfast and have a meeting. And so we started having those meetings, obviously virtually. And I kind of started to think, it would be nice if we could have breakfast together. When you can break bread together, things go better, so on and so forth. So I went out and bought hiking meals and mailed them to each one of their homes with directions so that we could have, pretend that we were together having a meal. And I guess my question is, can improv be some of those types of things as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a shared experience is so important, like you said, and the gathering together with our teams, whether in a work context or not, is really about a shared experience. And so improv can really bring us together through play. And I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, improvising in that way of how to adjust and adapt to the COVID situation, not being able to have breakfast together, so important, right? And I think that's what's great about improv as well, is that when you practice being in the moment, that adaptability, that ability to change and try things, it leaks over beautifully into other areas of your life where you become more adaptable and able to change. And I think in our 21st century, where technology is changing, the economy is changing so quickly, being able to adapt and be malleable and be in the moment are just increasingly more and more important skills, right? I think we recognize that our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, you could potentially have the same expertise and the same job for 50 years. And that is increasingly not true. So the ability to adapt and be comfortable being uncomfortable, as we said, is like so important. One other thing I wanted to share, going back to what you were saying about when you started your meetings with like what's going on in the last week and people instantly went negative, right? And encouraging people to go positive. I think that's so important. And one of the things I love about improv is that in our lives and in our organizations and as leaders, we spend way too much of our focus and our energy on what's going wrong and what's broken and what's not working, and way too little of our energy and focus on what's going right and building on that. When I was learning how to drive in high school, I took one lesson with a kind of driving instructor, and something he said stuck with me. I think is really true for driving, but for life, which is when you're turning, your instinct is often, when you're learning, is to look at the curb, to look at the traffic pole, and make sure you're avoiding those. But when you do that, what you unintentionally do is you turn your car towards those things. And what you actually want to be doing is looking at the middle of the lane, looking far down the road, and that will kind of help keep you going that way. And I think unintentionally, we all do that a lot in our lives, right? We look at the thing we don't want to do. We look at the thing we want to avoid rather than looking ahead. So one practice that I have that I love to share with folks for every program I do, whether it's with kids, whether it's at an organization, it's a tour, all my different projects, is after every program for 5 minutes, I go through highlights and then ebbies. So highlights, obvious people have different words for that, but like what went great? What was the best part of this program? This game was amazing. Or this moment where the CEO was cracking up and, spitting out milk that he was drinking, whatever it was. And then EBBIES stands for even better ifs, even better ifs. So we think about the next time I do this similar program, it would be even better if ... right? Acknowledging that it didn't go perfectly, but we're focusing that on what would be better next time. So rather than saying, oh my gosh, my computer broke halfway through and I didn't have those slides and we lost 15 minutes trying to fix the computer, saying, you know what, it would be even better if I always had a paper copy in my folder. So if the computer breaks, I'm fine. I'm ready to go, right? So helping people to, again, steer towards the middle of the road, right? To think about, okay, how would it be even better if, rather than what's going wrong, I think is such an important shift. And again, improv can help us to have that positive building mindset rather than the negative fear mindset.
I like that. I think that's important for everybody to be able to do that. I was just thinking through different events and different meetings and different things, and oftentimes afterwards, even myself, I'm thinking about, well, that didn't go so well, or that I need to throw that out. So I like the kind of subtle shift there on the way you think about that. I also wanted, so you have a improv comedy tour that works its way around to Jewish schools, right? And
yeah,
so tell me a little bit more about that, and what have been your experiences around working with youth?
Yeah, so 13 years ago, I co-founded a group called the Bible Players, which is an educational Jewish comedy team with the goal of really using improv and comedy as a way to explore Jewish stories, Jewish values through play. And this really came out of the work that I've done over the last 15, 20 years has really been in improv spaces and comedy spaces and also in education. And so for me, the values of improv really spoke to the Jewish values that I was raised with, but no one was kind of bringing these worlds together. So I've loved really traveling around to schools and camps and synagogues, working with kids and doing a lot of the same games like speech that I mentioned and really unpacking it from a values-based perspective of like what Jewish values are we embodying here? How do we practice our Jewish values? And in the way that I was talking about kind of tangibles and intangibles, in the same way, I think with Judaism, with Jewish values, some of these values of, in Hebrew, it's chesed is like loving kindness, or shalom bayit is the idea of peace in our home. But it's kind of an abstract idea, like how do we really practice that? And so for me, improv is a great way to help kids and adults really practice what does it look like to show kindness to people? How do we actually be a better listener, right? And so I love bringing these programs to different schools and working with educators on how they can use improv as a way to continue this learning and continue the growth with their students.
That is awesome. Now I want to come see one. That would be fun.
Yeah, for sure.
So thinking about the listeners, somebody that's thinking about getting started, going down this road, what is one piece of advice or one actionable item that they could do today to help them get started down this road?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if anything is sticking with you from this conversation, I think that would be great. Like thinking about highlights and ebbies, thinking about making things even better if. Challenging yourself with meetings, I would say, to think about, are you being intentional with your meetings? How might you bring in more energy and more fun? And really just noticing at your next few meetings, what is the energy level? What is the engagement level? How much are people participating? And in terms of like next steps, if people want to learn more about improv and things, I'm happy to share if people want to reach out the template that I mentioned for how to do better meetings. I'm always happy to share that with everyone so that you can kind of use that as a moment to build and happy to recommend books. There's one called Do Improvise by Robert Poynton. That's really a beautiful book about improvisation and the power that it has in our own lives. And if you're interested in bringing a lot of improv games to your business, there's a great book called Business Improv. That's a great book that these two authors wrote together and gives some great games that you can take into your workplace right now. So those are definitely two resources that I love to mention. But, I would say more than anything, model the leadership that you want to see on your team and find ways to use play to bring your team together, whether it's improv or not. Think about when's the last time you played. And I often encourage companies when they bring us in, I say, challenge yourself to like once a month, 1 hour a month is what I say. Start with 1 hour a month that you're going to dedicate to building your team, to play, to connecting your team rather than, sales or some other concrete thing, but to working on your team, to building your team.
So what about for the skeptic? What is, well, I guess my question would be, what are they losing by not trying this?
Yeah. Well, one thing is you're losing people. So, I think for retention of employees, if you're not thinking about the employee experience and people being happy at organizations and seen, you definitely are going to suffer. And I think anyone that runs a business who's listening to this knows that hiring and onboarding and finding those great people is one of the hardest things they have to do. So if you're not thinking about the great people on your team and how to keep them happy, whether it's improv or not, I think that's the single biggest thing that you're going to lose. And the other aspect is that if you're not encouraging people to share their ideas and to grow, you're losing out on all the talents on your team that aren't very specific to their role, right? So your person that you have that's doing an admin role that has hilarious marketing ideas, you're losing out on those ideas because you're not inviting them to share their ideas. So I think bringing the full potential of your team is the other thing that you're losing.
So you just said something. I'm curious your thoughts. I believe we hear quite frequently about turnover. If I'm talking to a company about turnover, their kind of way of rationalizing the turnover within their business is, look, I've read the statistics. People today are going to have 8 jobs or whatever the statistics are, throughout their career. People don't stay somewhere for 30 years anymore. And I kind of challenge back that, okay, that might be true, but why couldn't they? So my question is, how do you feel about that? You just said losing people. Can we prolong that, or not prolong? Can we keep people longer? Can we have higher retention numbers? Or is it something that we should just chalk up to what it is today, and people are going to leave no matter what? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the culture is always shifting, and obviously every industry is different. So I can't speak as an expert in all the different industries. And what I would say is, if it was just the times and the culture, it would be the same across industries, across companies, right? But it's not. And I think that for our company, we should focus on what we can control and not worry as much about what we can't control. And what we can control for our organizations is, do our employees feel excited about coming to work? Do they see the potential to grow? And I think, like you're saying, when people say they don't stay at the same organization for 30 years, what I would say is people don't want to be stuck in the same job for 30 years, right? They don't want to be stuck in the same role, the same tasks. But if you give them a path to grow and encourage them to move up in leadership, I think people would love the idea of growing with an organization and doing more and more and getting creative. And I think that's what it's about, is about cultivating their full selves and their full creativity, so that you're not putting them in a box and saying, send these emails and don't ask questions. That's definitely a recipe for someone wanting to leave and find the next job, right? Because it's just going to get boring to them, right? And they're going to see the other possibilities. But if you say, you're doing a great job sending those emails, let me ask you, what else do you want to be doing, right? Like, what else are you looking to do at the company? And I think a lot of that can come out in these games, in play, in treating people more holistically. They're going to let you know, right? And some people might say, you know what, this is just emailing for me. This is just a job for now. And it's like, okay, right? But other folks, I think you're going to find would be more interested. One of the things that we help organizations with is, organizations have kind of gotten on board with the idea of having like company values, that's important. But for a lot of organizations, it's just a page on their website, and here's our 5 or 10 values. Their staff may or may not even know those values, and they certainly don't get enacted upon. But we work with a lot of companies on doing their onboarding for all their new folks. And what we do is we play games to unpack the different values so that they really feel a connection to the values and start to think about, how does this connect with our work? How do we actually show radical kindness, or, giving 110%, whatever the values may be? How does this actually play out? So I think being intentional about that is another way in which you get people excited about their work. Because I think another thing is that in past times, people saw their work as their work and their life as their life, and they didn't need to necessarily find meaning in their work or be connected to the value of their work. But I think increasingly people don't always have the option, but hope for that, right? And so if you can help them see why our work is putting good out into the world, why we're doing great things, they're going to want to grow with you as opposed to going somewhere else.
I like it. So Andrew, where can people find out more about you? If somebody's listening and thinking, I want to get engaged with him, which I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, but you are right here in Pennsylvania, and as I've said many times, all good things come from Pennsylvania. But you're located in Philadelphia. How do people get in touch with you? How can they find out more? And you mentioned the book that might be coming out, I think, in the near future. So what platforms will that be on, and where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm down here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So if you're listening and nearby, find me online and we can have a coffee. I would love that. Anyone can email me. My email is just andrew@artlyworking.com. That's ARTLY working.com. not hardly working, artly working. You can look us up on artlyworking.com to see more about these programs. But yeah, we definitely encourage everyone to reach out. I love to talk, to help people think about their challenges, how they can be helped, how we can improve their teams and work on it. And the book that I'm working on is going to come out next year in 2026, and it's going to be available everywhere. I'm about halfway through writing it, I'll say, and I'm really excited to share it. The goal is really the working subtitle is Personal Courage to Community Change, that it's about participate. And so the first half of the book is focused on ourselves and how do we learn to participate more? How do we get over our own fears and get out of our own way? And the second half is really focused on how do we use those skills to help our community, to help our organization, to help our families, the groups in which we work, to help them participate and them to grow. And some of the tools that I've learned from performing, from teaching, from working with organizations. So I'm excited to share that next year with the world. But yeah, please reach out. I'd love to talk, whether you're in Philadelphia or Amsterdam or wherever you are in the world. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Andrew, we end every podcast with 3 questions, kind of rapid fire. We ask all of our guests the same 3 questions. The first question is really derived out of years of having conversations with business owners, leaders, managers, and hearing commonalities around, well, when I was in high school, we learned this, or the students today that I'm hiring don't have this. And I thought, what a great opportunity to ask leadership experts from around the world if we could get all of the school administrators from across the world sitting in one room in front of us. What is one piece of advice that you would give them of something that they could include into a student's educational career that would help and aid them into the future?
Don't cut the arts. The arts are so important. And I think that when we've gotten really focused in a beautiful statistical way on math and reading and how important those skills are, that's so important. And I think the skills that I learned and the leadership skills that I learned from the arts and theater programs in my high school are invaluable. And so if administrators are listening, find the money and the budget and the energy for those things and recognize the value of the arts.
Absolutely. If I'll just add one thing to that. It was a line from the movie Mr. Holland's Opus, and it has stuck with me all these years. If we remove the arts, in 50 years, what are we going to be reading and writing about? And I thought that was kind of interesting. So the second question, which you did talk a little bit earlier about a few books that you recommended, but this question is, what is your go-to book that over the years you have continually went back to get good insights out of?
One of my favorites over the last few years is The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker, which is just a beautiful book about how to be intentional and innovative and engaging with all the gatherings we do, whether it's a dinner party at our house or a company-wide retreat. So The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker, can't recommend highly enough.
Awesome. And the last question, in all of the technology that's out there today, what is your most useful and favorite piece of technology that you're using today?
Well, it's simple, but Google Docs. I mean, Google Docs is just transformative for me in terms of the ability to collaborate with friends on what I'm writing and creative writing. For the 15 years I've been teaching improv and writing comedy, I just love the ability to share and collaborate. And I also use it with my neighborhood work, with family work. I think thinking about planning in a collaborative way is so great. And so that's always my favorite. An obvious one, but I love it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully maybe we get you back on another time. And I think if we get you back on another time, we're going to start with improv, and that'll really get people wondering what's happening. But thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Amos. Yeah, it's been wonderful to talk to you.
And for our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out our past episodes, and don't forget to follow us on whatever platform you're listening on so that you get alerts whenever new episodes come out. And don't forget to check us out at McCoyLeadership.com. Till next time, we appreciate all of you.